Hello everyone, in this video I will be talking about Pinocchio and Pippi Longstocking as static and dynamic characters. To give a little refresher, a dynamic character is one who learns a lesson in the book and changes in some way, sometimes for the better and sometimes for the worse. And, on the other hand, a static character is one who does not undergo any change in the book and stays the same in the end. So with Pinocchio, from the start, as he is being built, we can see he is very mischievous and rebellious. Pinocchio met people like the Cricket and Blue Fairy, who all tried to give him advice, but then Pinocchio met people like the Cat and the Fox and Lampwick, who all in all just got Pinocchio into trouble. So towards the end of the book, we can see a change in Pinocchio's ways when he starts working to earn milk for his sick elderly father. And Pinocchio eventually learns from his mistakes and is turned into a real boy. Pippi Longstocking, on the other hand, is a very unusual 9-year-old girl with a very wild side. Pippi behaves very poorly for a 9-year-old girl and is constantly getting into trouble. For example, when the police come to take her to a children's home, she fights them off. In school, she behaves poorly. She entertains the thieves who come into her home. She ruins the coffee party by acting a fool. And at her birthday, she shoots off a gun. So as a reader, we start to wonder if Pippi will ever change her ways. Well, she doesn't, and at the end of the book, says to Tommy and Anika, "I'm going to be a pirate when I grow up. Are you?" So at the end of the book, we can see that Pippi still has no idea what it means to grow up, which makes her a static character. We have now seen why Pinocchio is a dynamic character and why Pippi Longstocking is a static character. But what would happen if we turned Pippi Longstocking into a dynamic character? With that being said, I am now going to read a short story I have written based on Pippi Longstocking. It is titled Pippi's Journey to Alaska. On the screen are some questions I have for you to keep in mind as I read. In a village far away lived a girl named Pippi Longstocking. Pippi was a 9-year-old girl who had a rather unusual life. Compared to other children's lives, hers was the life every child wanted to have. This was because Pippi had what seemed to be everything. She lived in a gigantic home that had everything to do. The house had a horse which Pippi was strong enough to lift as she pleased. She got to go on the coolest adventures with her parents. Every summer, her family always takes one huge trip to someplace in the world that is so cool it would blow your mind. Yes, Pippi had a rather cool life, but she always knew how to be the life of the party, make a mess, and get into trouble. To most people, Pippi had the dream life, but little did they know how much trouble her precious wild life caused her. In the summer of 2008, Pippi's family had decided to take a trip to Alaska. Alaska is known for its bears, moose, rivers, and mountains. When Pippi first heard about the trip, she jumped with joy while crying about how it was going to be the best trip ever. Pippi had so many ideas about what Alaska would be like. "Will I go fishing?" she thought to herself. Within seconds, she said to herself, "No, fishing will be way too boring. What cool things would I be able to come back and tell my friends about fishing?" So, after another long 10 minutes of hard thinking, Pippi had a perfect idea. "I will wrestle a bear," said Pippi confidently. Unlike the average person, Pippi had no worries about wrestling a bear. She was confident she would win with no problem. Weeks passed, and soon the trip Pippi had been so restless about was finally here. Pippi hurried down the hall to grab her bright red ruby suitcase so she could pack. Once she began packing, millions of items went flying across the room as she tried to find the perfect outfits to bring along. After 5 exhausting hours of packing, Pippi had finally found the perfect outfits to bring along, and she hurried out the door with her family so they could catch their flight. Since this was Pippi's first time flying, she had never been to an airport before, so she was a little curious as to what the place would be like. Pippi and her family soon arrived at the airport, bright and smiling. Speeding along through the airport, the family had checked their bags and were now on the plane waiting for takeoff. But something was missing. "Where is Pippi?" asked the mother, concerned. Pippi was nowhere to be seen, and her mother had no memory of where she might have lost her at. Within an instant, Pippi's father knew something was up, and Pippi was up to no good. With that thought in mind, Pippi's mother and father ran off the plane as fast as a lion in hopes to find Pippi. Pippi's father knew that his daughter had a very curious mind and a ridiculously wild side. The trip had just begun, and it was already off to a horrible start, thought the mother, frustrated. But, on the other hand, Pippi was having the time of her life. She was currently sitting on the wing of the plane, exploring the thing. Why, you might ask? Well, Pippi had never seen a plane before, and with a mind as curious as hers, she just couldn't resist when it was right in front of her. Although she was having fun, she did have some worry, like her parents. What if the plane took off, and how much trouble she would be in? Pippi closed her eyes for a second so she could admire the beautiful plane and the blue sunny sky. Unfortunately for Pippi, when she opened her eyes, she realized her fun was over as she saw her parents staring at her through the huge glass window of the waiting area. Along with that, she now had 50 men screaming at her to get down. Pippi was now scared that if she caused so much trouble, she wouldn't be able to travel to Alaska and fight a bear, so she jumped down in the blink of an eye and started apologizing a million times. The men must have been in a fantastically good mood because they let Pippi and her family back on the plane as long as she promised to cause no more trouble. And she did. Throughout Pippi's life, her parents have always taught her to be respectful, say please and thank you, use inside voices, act like a lady, and how to problem solve. But that was totally the opposite of Pippi and how Pippi has been acting on the trip so far. Pippi felt bad for her actions and was unsure of what would happen if she continued this behavior. She realized her worry and frustration she caused her parents, so she decided she would snore away on the plane and take a nap. When she awoke from her slumber, she had arrived in the beautiful Alaska where she would take on a bear. Hours passed and the family was now exploring the beautiful outdoors of Alaska. Their tour guide had warned them not to make contact with any wildlife they see. But Pippi had a different plan. "If I see a mean bear, I am going to wrestle him and prove that no bear can hurt me," said Pippi proudly. So on went the family, hiking the beautiful mountains of Alaska in awe of all the scenery, when suddenly Pippi went missing again. Her mother and father panicked as they soon looked for their daughter. Did she fall? Is she hurt? Did a moose trample her? These were all thoughts of Pippi's parents, who had no idea if something bad had happened to their daughter. This time, Pippi came back to her parents on her own and wondered why they were so worried. Pippi's parents explained to her that if she needs to go somewhere, she needs to tell someone so they know where she is. Pippi understood and once again felt bad for all the worries she had already caused her parents on this trip. So, Pippi thought to herself, "I will no longer fight a bear on this trip. I realize what a terrible child I am being, and from now on I will be a perfect angel." Yes, Pippi was upset she wouldn't get to wrestle a bear, but she was glad her parents would be able to enjoy a trip with no worry. Pippi also made herself feel better about not being able to wrestle a bear because deep down she knew she would have won. Deep inside, Pippi knew that her parents had raised her to respect others, be polite, use an inside voice, and act like a lady. So she felt poorly about her actions to check out the plane and wander off in the middle of the mountains. Pippi also knew that if she ever played games like this again, her parents might never go on another vacation again. And what fun would that be, thought Pippi. So for the rest of the Alaska trip of the summer of 2018, Pippi used her manners, respected everyone she met, said please and thank you, and acted like a mature adult, just like her parents had raised her.